Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Get Out of Rap. Today I'm joined by Maxine Allard, and Maxine is the Senior Account Director at Odigo. Hi Maxine.
Hi.
Thanks very much for joining. We've probably already come up with a separate podcast before we hit record, so look out for that on a future date. Let's start where everyone likes to start and talk about your career to date. So you're now Senior Director at Odigo and loving life there. How have you got to this point?
A good question. I was obsessed by telephones as a child, absolutely obsessed by them, thought they were the most wonderful thing in the world. So it's no surprise that one of my very first jobs was working for BT. And then when I left sunny Suffolk and went to the glitzy big lights of London, I worked in the telecoms team at Schroders Bank for a while. Once I'd learned loads there, and I really learned loads there. I had a brilliant mentor in the telecoms manager there. She was fantastic. I moved from there to working for what was an Octel partner. I then moved to work for Octel, who were acquired by Lucent, that became a buyer. Then I went back to BT, and since then I've worked for Aspect, Noble, who are now both of Alvaria, and now I'm at Odigo. So just telecoms contact centre nearly all the way through.
Wow. And that from that very first early point then, what was it about the telephone itself that was so captivated you as a youngster?
I think it was the understanding that you could talk to anybody anywhere, and it was just talking then. Obviously there's no FaceTime way back then, and I just thought it was wonderful. The ability to dial a few numbers and you can speak to anybody in the world. When I was at school, what would now be junior school, I was in that kind of American middle school type system. So I was at middle school. There was a competition to write an essay about the benefits of being in the European community, and I think even then I was writing about communicating and talking to people in different countries and how easy it was and why that was a great thing. And I'd have been about 10 or 11 about then. I must have been an awfully boring child.
I love it. And that just carried on then, did it?
Yeah, really. I just love it. I just think that there's just something about it. And now, of course, I used to take things to bits to try to understand how they work, but taking a telephone to bits or a radio to bits and seeing circuit boards meant nothing to me as a child. I was probably better off with a Meccano. But that hasn't really changed. I love the intelligence of the technology. I like the intelligent application of it and the possibility of it, the power in it. I just find it incredible, and I'm still the same with that. Every new thing I don't understand how it works. I really wish I did, but it's what it does. It's how the technology just enhances the communication, or it should do. It absolutely should do. So it's still, you can still, I love it, absolutely love it.
Well, your enthusiasm and passion for it is tangible, and I think it's great that you can apply that in the contact center, because when you think about it, if I talk to people outside of our industry and say I work in contact centers, everyone always assumes, I think, the first port of call is that it's your talking to customers, where in fact what you really nicely evidence is, if you're passionate about technology and communication and making the best of that for everyone's benefit, contact centers are a great place to be, because there's so much of that technology and so many forward thinking people in it.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my customers this morning. He's recording a podcast for us today, and I talked to him about the things we'd spoken about, a little bit about how you can grow so easily from being in a contact center role, and I hadn't realized that there's a massive proportion of people in his team. He owns the what they call virtual contact center for a big utilities provider in the UK. And loads of people at senior level in his team have actually worked their way up. So in various different guises, they've been in contact centre in some way, and just worked their way up the organisation. And I hadn't realised, you just assume everybody's come in on there with their fantastic electrical or mechanical degrees, engineering or whatever, and got into these marvellous development and strategic roles. And actually lots of them, started in a not dissimilar way to me and you, I believe, actually, and just sort of worked the way up through the organisation. And that was, I had no idea. It just doesn't come up, does it, outside of the industry,
Let's touch on that then, because it's, I think, again, people listening sometimes, like you say, you look at others, especially those in senior roles, and go, you've just landed here from outer space somehow, ready for this role. Absolutely, you've got every qualification that you need, every skill, and you've known the right people. Whereas in fact, we've all had a bit of kind of pinball type careers, because you've rattled through yours. What kind of different roles, or what message would you say about how your career can help those who might want to go on the same journey?
I think it's about having a passion for what you do, and that sounds a little bit cliched. That whole thing about if you do what you love, you never have to work a day. I'm not sure I completely agree entirely with that, because I'm not sure it's healthy to be so immersed in work. But I think I have been lucky, actually. I think I generally consider myself to be lucky, and I've been in fortunate positions where I've been invited into roles that really suit me. But I think making sure you have a really solid understanding and a grounding in whatever field it is you want to go into. So in my case, it was, the desire to be in a customer facing role within technology, and because I like those conversations, I like solving problems. And I do joke that I should have been an engineer, or I should have been in pre-sales, or even be a service delivery manager, although that's a very difficult job, because at the core of what I like doing, of what satisfies me, is solving problems. And I think if you can find whatever it is that satisfies your work need, and then focus on that, you can find a way to make it fit. I think we touched on this before. It concerns me slightly at the moment that I think that there's a lot of people with a lot of ability who aren't necessarily being given the opportunity to move into these kinds of roles, or to even get in an entry level position. I'm really glad and actually quite excited to see that BT again, but they never really stopped, and some other businesses, I think Lloyds Bank, but you might need to check that, are looking at apprenticeships again. And I think that brings opportunity to people who absolutely have ability but might not have had the opportunity to go to university. And for a long time, any degree, even if it's a third in, I don't know, I can't think of anything, third in something, yes, a third in drama, which is, was considered minimum entry level for blue chip organizations. And actually, I think that disadvantages a lot of people that don't necessarily come from a background where going to university is expected, but they may well have masses and masses of ability. And to go back to the contact center thing, I do see contact center as one of the best routes into businesses that you might want to work for. Another person that I was speaking with this morning said that he used to work with a bank, and when you went into the bank, on the wall there were handprints of, when you went into the contact center, there were handprints of every person who'd worked in that contact center that had then elevated out of, let's say elevated, that speaks volumes, actually. Let's touch on that in a second. Yeah. Everybody that had then moved out of the contact center into other parts of the bank. And I thought that was, to make the point, you can start here. I loved that. I don't know which one it was. I can't believe I haven't been there. So
well, that's one to go to. But what a lovely visual representation of something that I think we definitely overlook in the industry in terms of how do we attract talent, because it's interesting, you kind of caught yourself saying elevate, and I know exactly what you mean because I've used similar language before, but I think it's okay to do that, and we can have sensible conversations around, as you rightly pointed out, I was an agent, and when the penny dropped that, hang on a minute, I can progress here quicker than anywhere else. I'm surrounded by lovely people. Every day someone made me belly laugh till I cried. And there was loads of opportunities all around me. And I would say that I was very conscientious and very driven to progress to team leader. And I went kind of like an operational route. All of those things taken into consideration, though, I still had very regular occurrences of the job being very, very tough. And, you know, it was seen, there were people who were quite happy to stay as customer service advisors or whatever you want to call them, and go, no, this is me, I'm good, I can switch off and I can interact really well, but I have no desire to go elsewhere. There was another group, I think, like me, who were like, this is good grounding for me, it's great understanding, but, you know, sometimes the end of a shift, you were just mentally done in. So, and that lends itself to then saying about kind of elevate or get out of an advisor role or progress into other areas.
Do you think, though, that actually going back to having that grounding, if you start in that role and you can cope with the kind of things that those advisors have to put up with every single day, again and again and again, and you do learn from it, you know, you learn how to have a conversation where both of you will end up satisfied at the end of it, you know, none of this ridiculous can I speak to a supervisor nonsense. But that I think that shows a level of determination, of resilience, of you know, just that ability to bounce back, which is resilience, really. I wonder if that grounding, because it is also another thing that then, you know, serves you well in future roles, because, you know, as you move, and let's say if we're talking about moving into more senior roles, those challenges are very, very different, from that kind of coalface work. But actually the tools you need are the resilience, the understanding, the determination, the, you know, how do we get to the best result all the time. So I wonder if there is a innate personality type in a skilled advisor that actually makes them an ideal candidate for you know, for moving on to more senior roles. Maybe there are more of them there than we've realized.
I completely agree with that, completely. I think there's a level of, it's just, you mentioned the resilience, you have to teach yourself not to react, deliver for that person who could be, it feels like they're attacking you, you know, they're not attacking you, but there's this, I've read further, actually, there's a mental dissonance and it's unhealthy. So you can say I know that they're not angry with me, they might be angry with the company that I'm working for, but the fact you still have to engage, it leaves a mental kind of scar. But I think if you can deal with that and then still communicate to a diplomatic resolution or a resolution that helps someone, that stands you in really good stead for the future. You know, I think kind of being able to deal with stuff like that continually is you definitely beneficial in later life, definitely. And we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about, I know you're very passionate, and when we spoke about what would you like to talk about, you know, one of the things was progression, and that we don't do enough to talk about the progression that is in our industry at a time when we are struggling to get in new talent. Seems mental, doesn't it?
Absolutely mad. I think we know that across all industries, people are, you know, struggling to retain good employees, and we touched on this briefly when we spoke before about, you know, if people are able to become hybrid workers, if they are able to work from home, that should open up more people to be able to move into these roles, to work from home, to work from wherever. Actually, obviously doesn't need to be at home. But I think the flip side of that is that by not having that kind of regular interaction with everybody, by not being in that supportive environment, you might lose the opportunity to spot people who would naturally have progressed had you still been in that kind of office environment. I'm a big believer in home working. I've been a home worker for, I think, 15 years, maybe even longer than that. So, the idea of having to be in the office all the time is quite challenging for me now, actually. I mean, I would do it, of course, but I would find that quite difficult. But in my role, you're part of a team, but you're fairly autonomous. And I think in the contact center environment, that team stuff is really, really important. You know who the stars are, you know who the stars in your team are, who to look out for, who to go to, who's the person who knows the answers to everything. There's always at least one person that knows the answer to everything. But what worries me in that environment is how much autonomy those advisors will have, how much opportunity will they have to shine if they're working from home, working to a script, only being assessed on a measurable, quantifiable, that's a better word, a quantifiable result, what, not average handling time, hopefully, but the kind of typical KPIs and stats and metrics that you see, when things like, the genuine customer satisfaction, was that achieved? What did that person do? Did they show initiative? Were they able to X, Y, Z? Are they? And it does worry me that that's going to be missed a bit. I've gone off on a tangent, haven't I?
No, I really like that, because the title of the essay to discuss is, does hybrid working negatively impact the progression opportunities of our frontline team members? I think it's a really good question. I've not heard it discussed that often.
No, I think if you were in the team before home working or hybrid working was as prevalent, and it had to be prevalent, and thank goodness we had the technology to support it, thank goodness. Although, sorry, another tangent, the amount of work that frontline advisors have had to do over the past 2 years within that isolating, mostly at-home environment, I think that needs to be recognised too. Yeah. I really, really do. I know there's the whole thing about frontline workers, and everybody's conveniently forgotten about a lot of it now, but there was a lot of work and a lot of hard work that I think frontline advisors were doing then, especially in specific industries. But anyway, if you joined a team post-pandemic or during a pandemic and you don't know that team and they don't know you, I think there is a danger that real talent, somebody with amazing ability, could be overlooked just because they're not there, they're not being seen to be a star. And I don't have the answer to how you mitigate that. I think we talked briefly before about gamification and employee engagement, all of those kinds of things, and I like gamification, actually. I as long as it's done well, and the advisor community are consulted on what they want it to look like, what they want the rewards to be. And used to talk about this quite a bit. For me, if I was going into the office, maximum reward, guaranteed car parking space where my precious car can sit and be in no danger. Other people didn't care less about that. They want a date night at the cinema, or dinner, or cash, or an afternoon off. Give me a duvet day. Actually, wouldn't mind one of those. But it's that, as long as the reward is worth it, you'll get that engagement. But typically, even with that, what's being measured is a quantifiable KPI type measure. I don't know how you find and reward incentive, or not incentive, I do mean, I can't think of the right word, of how you reward the natural good behavior, consistent good behavior, using your intelligence to solve a problem, even though it's maybe slightly off script, all of those kinds of things. I'm not sure, I don't know that there's a way to do that unless you're observed doing it. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that, people are monitored 24/7 to understand the conversations that are being had outside of, useful tools like speech analytics and AQM, all those kinds of things. But I don't know how you get there. I don't know how you spot your rising star. I wonder if there's a place in contact center for contact center specific talent pools, or the rising stars, and not necessarily just people who've come in at early 20s, have it across the board. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, you're in this age range, which is what I've seen before with talent spotting. It's at the entry level, which is good because obviously you need that, but I wonder if there's a place for it in contact center separate from that kind of, these are our young rising stars model.
I completely agree with lots of what you said there. Very thought-provoking, because it's made me think about the challenge we have from a hybrid workforce, where I would say that as I became more senior, a lot of, I would like to go and spend time with the teams as much as possible to find out who people were, because I'd just seen their names on reports or whatever it may. Like you say, we don't suffer from numbers or the stats or data, a lack of it. We've got loads, haven't we, in our industry? So you'd like to go out and see who people were and just kind of observe them, as you say. And I know we're all aware of the phrase microaggressions, but I also think something you said then prompted me. What we miss is the micro interactions. It's just a small little, because you were saying something about gamification and incentive schemes, and I thought, well, I was thinking, well, peer-to-peer is a good one, but peer-to-peer is far easier when, if the person sat next to you is always really helpful, and that's in between calls or helping you with your system or technology, plugging your headset in, whatever it may be. And then you go, right, I'm going to recognize Charlotte here with this peer-to-peer scheme. Those kind of things are harder in a remote environment, because even a micro interaction needs some sort of planning. You need availability. You need the person that you'd like to have a little interaction with to be available at the same time. It's all of these things are gone. And I think it was in those moments, especially if you were observing, you could see people and go, I know it's going to sound like I'm a hippie now, but there were people who they just had a good zen about them as well. You were just being close to them in that area. That sounds wrong. Just being in the contact center and seeing people operate and go, I like how this person conducts themselves. It's something more than body language.
There's you see natural leaders in that environment too.
Yes.
People, and also in a lot of roles in a lot of businesses, there are roles that need charisma, and that person may not be the most amazing advisor, but they may have some charismatic spark that means that they would fit well into another role in the business. And again, if you're not there seeing that, I don't know how well it comes over. I also, you're also, when you're in, and I keep stressing this, I am not against hybrid working in any way. I think
no, me neither.
So healthy. But I think if you're in the contact center environment, as you said, you can see who is present, who's engaged, who's I can't, who is it that is a presence in that environment. And it's so I am unless I have missed something, I'm really struggling to think of how you would spot that in a full remote environment. There must be ways, because it still happens, you know. And I think also that there's everybody's so busy. I think that's probably where I was trying to go with this. I think that you know, you look at the advisors are very busy, supervisors are incredibly busy, their supervisors are very, very busy. So if you're not all there, things that used to slip through the net even when everybody was present, so things like one-to-ones, training, QA, QM kind of conversations, they all go the minute the contact center is busy, and they just disappear. And I think, from what I see, that most contact centers are busier than ever. So again, you know, I think we have to be really, really careful that certainly the one-to-one sessions are, and training too, don't get overlooked in that rush to service our customers, because that's what we're there for. You're there to service our customers. And I just wonder how much we're missing at the minute.
I think it's another spot on point, because it's even some of the language that you hear people use around that is, of course we don't do them because we've got the service levels are more important. If you flip that on its head, and I have worked with or seen places that have kind of like a 3-line whip around these things, that, you know what, if we don't hit our service levels because we're doing regular one-to-ones or coaching sessions, then what this is identifying is we have a resourcing challenge, rather than we hit our service levels but no one's being developed. And to your point, it's even more important, which I absolutely love, because there's people that have come into the industry that we could lose because we haven't invested in their development, or even taken the time to see them, like you said earlier. Because if we're not doing it remotely, if we're not doing the coaching sessions, if we're not going, you know, in my coaching session, I spoke to someone and I reckon they've got a great future. They're really interested in finance or whatever it may be. I'm going to try and facilitate a meeting with a finance manager to do X, Y, and Z. Those kind of things can be so easily forgotten.
I don't think I've ever asked a supervisor if they are in any way rewarded or recognised for spotting talent that could move into other parts and make a difference in other parts of the business.
Another light bulb you've just had there, because we do refer a friend all the time, don't we, for external. We don't do, I've not heard of either. Maybe someone listening will say they're screaming at their car stereo now, going, we do it. If you do, please get in touch. But I think that I love that. So this would be talent recognition scheme. And I do think, like you said earlier as well, be careful that you don't, that you make sure the net is wide enough, that it isn't just, here's our aspiring future stars and they're all under the age of 21, you know, because one of your aspiring stars could be 61. Yeah, absolutely. I just, when you go into, like you, I'm obviously a different type of role. I love going into contact centers and spending time with them, seeing what they do, how they interact. And it is so, I like the demographic mix. It's great. You know, I think I was reading somewhere that something like 70% of contact center staff are female. And I think that might be reducing. I can't, I'm losing my words today. I think there may be more men moving into those roles now than I've seen previously. I don't know. I haven't looked at latest stats. But actually, and I'm thinking of one contact center in particular, but I used to spend a lot of time in this particular contact center because I spent a lot of time with the customer. But you couldn't get anywhere without walking through on the floors. You couldn't get to any meeting room without walking through the contact center, apart from probably the board suite, and I wasn't so you got a real sense of it. And then we'd ask to spend time there so we can help, you know, so you can see, well, you know, you're doing it this way, but you bought this fabulous technology and it could do this, so
you know, we don't have to spend any more money with us to make all these savings. Why would you not do it? But the sense of community in contact centre is huge. The support, I mean, obviously there must be times when people don't get on, of course, but the support, the help, the banter, the interaction, it's like, and this is such a cliche, but it is like a massive, extended, possibly slightly dysfunctional family. But you all know, everybody knows everybody's little quirks, and you know how they have their coffee and all of that kind of stuff. And to touch on a point you made earlier, I think that one of the other things that gets missed is that support. It's really, you know, you come off, as you said when we were speaking before, you know, you come off a really bad call, somebody will have heard that and they'll ask you if you're all right, or you can turn to the person next to you and just go, and it's really hard to do that when you're not with that person. It's hard to ask for help. People, I don't think many people really like asking for help. Not really. Most people are happy to give it, very happy to help, I think, but asking for it is really, really hard. And again, particularly if you feel you're being judged on specific results, it can be really hard to ask for help and support if you think that that will be counted against you in some way. So again, I wonder if there's a, you know, how do you encourage people? How do you prove to people that they're in a safe environment? Again,
it's a real challenge, isn't it? It's a real challenge, because you keep prompting me to think about my own times on the phone, and how, like you say, my recent past is, I would say I'm more at home than I'm in any office or contact center, and that's been the case for the last 7-8 years. So I'm a big believer in home working, and I wouldn't want to not have that as a viable option realistically. But there's things that you do miss. I was just thinking then about a time when I had a particularly challenging customer who started the call by just shouting. They're very upset, and it was one of those ones where the people near you can hear the shout, so you kind of pull your headset, you kind of, you know, just taken aback. And this went on for, it felt an inordinate length of time, but this went on for ages. And when I'd completed the call, a guy called Mark sat next to me, just went, and it was just, he just said, best customer you've ever spoken to, you know. Excuse me. And it was just, that instantly took me from a very low place to a very high, laughing. And I would just think, if I had that exact same call, I could have messaged Mark, I'm sure, and said, I've just had a terrible call, blah, blah, blah. And he would have sent back a GIF maybe, or something else that, but I can't imagine it having the same, it was just a release of pressure, and I was ready to get out of rap, go back on the next call, because he just absolutely, his comedy timing was perfect, you know, just in the moment. And it's like, yeah, she was amazing. And then you're back on, and those kind of things we're missing, aren't we? I wonder how people are addressing them, or if they're even thinking about it.
Oh, I think they're thinking about it. When conversations early in the pandemic, one of the things that one customer in particular was really concerned about was how they maintained that. You know, how do we maintain that at home? I actually don't know how they did manage it. It was a good supportive environment, so I'm fairly certain they'll have possibly done, you know, quick video calls or meeting, you know, get-togethers or whatever. But that, you do lose that in the moment thing. You can't not, unless the entire contact center was on a Zoom call like this.
Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Really difficult.
I was taken with a stat that you shared as well, and it definitely, I would say, reflects my career, in that some 70% of people in the contact centers are female. When you think about the kind of the area of the contact center industry that you've been in, technology, is that the same? Has it been? How's that experience been?
Not the same, actually. Surprisingly, because I don't know the stat for my industry. Maybe I should look at that. I've often been the only woman in a team, or the one of two women in a team, something like that. When I was in my first leadership role, I was one of only 3 women out of 20 who were on the senior management team. Yeah, so it's not reflected in the same way. I wonder though, if you look at contact center progression, I think you do see a number of women. So the lady I referenced at the start, Diane Ward, when I was at Schroders, was she was head of telecoms. She had worked her way up, and knew a number of other women in the industry, which meant that I also got to meet them, because she was an amazing boss. She taught me so much, and so I think you fairly often see women who've moved into head of contact center, head of customer services, but I think we touched on this before. It kind of seems to stop there. It doesn't necessarily then translate into board level type positions. And I did have a quick look at why that was, and everybody, that's quite a common question, is what happens there. And there is, sorry to do the statistic thing, I don't do this very often, but for every 100 men that are promoted, only 86 women will be. Wow. So and it's called the broken rung, apparently. Who knew? So as you get to fewer roles, the available pool of candidates is smaller. And obviously that's magnified again when you're talking about women of colour, because they're just fewer and fewer. So I don't know if that also applies in contact centre, even though you're starting from a position where there are 70% of people in those roles are women. I don't know if the promotion ratio is still the same if more men are promoted than women are into those roles. I'm not sure that's the point you were making necessarily.
No, I think it's a really interesting point. I'd never heard of that. But again, this whole last few years, actually, because I've always felt like one of the reasons I loved contact centres was, like you mentioned, diversity. They always felt very equitable places, and inclusive. Very inclusive. Yeah. But I think that kind of blinded me a little bit to the lived experiences of people who, unlike me, white middle-aged male, have had very different experiences to either get to the same position I'm in or not get it, and I think, again, you can hold the same two things at the same time, which is a love of our industry and celebrating its diversity, its inclusivity, that it's an equitable place, but also say, well, we don't have many minorities in C-level positions. We've got to do something. What are we going to do? Where are the role models? Do you have shadow boards? Where are your policies and procedures that are showing that you're actively tackling this? I think you can absolutely hold both positions.
Absolutely, and you can see industries and in each industry there are standout businesses that do this well, that we see, that we know do this well. So it's absolutely a thing. It is absolutely possible. Is sometimes, I don't think it's lack of willingness. Sometimes I think it's lack of, I'm not even going to say understanding. I do think it comes back to what is perceived as the available pool of talent, and then, so I suppose we're working that right back to then, well, where's your feeder for that? Where are you choosing from? If you're only choosing, and you say about being white, middle class male, I'm middle age, whatever you said, I'm the same, just female. And I know that I have had I've benefited from that. I know, I've benefited from that privilege, and I just want other people to have the same opportunity, the more opportunity, but because, and there's got to be a way of finding it. There's, if you're in if you're in a senior role in a massive blue chip organization, and you have some input into who you're bringing into the business, well, have people stay with your business forever, or let them go around and invite them to come back, because it's, this talent is not that hard to spot, is it? Not really, and again, it's very, very early in my career to talk about BT again. They absolutely had a management, they looked for management talent in their early intake, in the young people that they brought into the business. This was the first time I worked for them. Certainly still do this. And I went to school with people who were found that way. I was slightly less diligent at the time when I was first with BT. So
I see.
This opportunity, had other priorities. But both the people I'm thinking of that went through were spotted. One of them, she was chief exec of a large communications business, and I think she's only just stopped doing that. That's quite galling. Most influential women in telecoms went to the same school, same year, and then others that I know did the same thing, who were equally, we were in the same class at primary school, for goodness sake. So they were spotted early on, and they've done very, very well because they were noticed. And I just think it's get to that again. If you want to change your board level, look where your talent is now, look where it is in your business. And it might not be a youthful intake, it might be somebody who's in their 40s or their 50s or whatever. Just, there is a way to find it, I think. And obviously nobody's expecting anybody to take somebody from the contact center and put them into the board. It's not going to happen. But there is, I'm wondering a bit, but there is talent there, I think. And I don't know if it's confidence. I don't know if that thing about women will respond to a role advertised if they've got 90 or 95% of the skills. Men will typically respond if it's 10 to 20%. And I don't know if that comes into it. I don't know if there's is it confidence as well?
I think all of these things all help us have more information about the situation. And I think maybe I could be in danger of being naive here, but I certainly, whether it's people that come on the podcast or people that I meet at events or people within my work or the clients we have, there's absolutely recognition now and a desire and an understanding that the more diverse the makeup of your teams are, including the board, the more successful your company's likely to be. And a lot of that, doesn't it, comes about because you mentioned someone who was very much a role model for you early in your career, and you no doubt are a role model for others that start why not starting in lower positions right now in Odigo or in a other company that you've worked in. If you can see it and you go, I recognize myself in that person, it reassures you and maybe makes you more confident to say, oh, I'm gonna go for it, because I find all of these kind of conversations and stats fascinating, because I think it really helps us understand both human nature but also the kind of organizational nature, how organizations operate, what their culture's like, and how you can be positively disruptive.
That culture things is a whole other podcast time, isn't it? I'm going to get off about that. I think there's when you see somebody living the values of your business in their day-to-day activities, that's got to be someone you want, isn't it? That's got to be someone you want to retain, so just making sure that they know that they've been noticed, You know, and you mentioned the peer-to-peer thing earlier, you know, the recognition type thing. I'm a big user of that, of course I would be, wouldn't I? But I like those things. But actually I think also there's a real power in senior in leaders noticing, and you know, if you get a personal message from somebody who you may not, you only know their name, but you know they've been told about you while you're on the, you know, you're working away, and you get a message from, I don't know, head of customer services, you know, somebody else saying, you know, heard you've done a really great job, thank you, da, 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 da. That, I think that's worth so much. And again, I don't know if it comes back to time, but I don't know how often that really happens. I have no view on that.
It's a really good shout. I again think personally, I've got someone I work with, and she is excellent at highlighting people doing good stuff and going up with that information and doing it in the moment as well, because I think that's a really good point. It seems like we've all never been busier. What she's really good at is she will do it in the moment. So it doesn't need to be like a play. It's not you know, super prose. It is from her, actually, unfortunately. She's brilliant at everything. But in the moment, she will let me, other directors, know about people that have done great things. And like you said earlier, it's really important, especially at a time when people have joined remotely. Their only experience of a company is remote. They haven't even been in the same room as the leadership team. How do you kind of get noticed? What do you, and again, that's probably another whole podcast, isn't it? Is what can you do if you're listening to this going, well, I kind of do fancy a career, but I'm worried that because I've joined remotely, people don't really know me, or it's only really my next line up that knows me, or my peers.
Oh,
how do I get known?
That's tough, actually, I think, because a big part of that getting known is your personality. And I think when you first start with a business, you don't necessarily display the things that would get you noticed, that actually will get you on that path. I think that's
after probation.
Yeah. But that's a really, I think that's definitely another podcast. I wish I had the answer to that. That is definitely you know, how do you get noticed positively?
Well, maybe let's talk afterwards and see if we can schedule in another one. Because one of the things you said, it also was potentially another podcast, was culture. Why did that kind of like trigger something in your mind then?
Because some organizations have a very well written set of values, and if you asked, I think at a senior level, there would be a core belief that the business abides by them. I think if you went to micro level, that is unfortunately all too often not the case. And so I think it's really challenging to change the underlying culture of a business. And you're certainly not going to change it by putting a few words into a mission statement, or, you know, changing your company objectives. And if you aren't honest about what that culture is today, if it's not healthy, or if anyone feels it's not healthy, then I think you aren't going to change it, because nobody will dare say anything to get it changed. So if you want to celebrate that inclusive, diverse, supportive nature that you see in so many contact centres, if you want that throughout your organisation, and really, why wouldn't you? You've got to recognise whether it's there or not now. I've worked for businesses that have the most fantastic culture, that are just marvellous, fabulous places to be, and others that are less so. And it's really, unless you're honest, I've said this already, but unless you are honest about what you are trying to achieve, and what that journey is from where you are now to where you want to be, I don't think culture necessarily is easily changed.
And I think
it's driven from the top. It absolutely, but down from the top down to supervisor. If there's anyone in the middle of that, that is, let's say, toxic, 'cause that's where we know we're going, but if there's anyone in that layer that has sufficient power to, or it is not interested in the people working for them, but more in the end result, then you're not going to have a supportive, inclusive environment, are you?
No, not at all. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's always a litmus test is go and ask people what's your culture like, how they answer, and the language they use and the words that they use should be seen in the values, rather than the other kind of other way around, which is here are our values. Try and introduce this into your everyday conversations, please. I've even observed, it wasn't a company I'm in or deal with, but I've observed someone asked one of the guys about their lanyard, and their lanyard had their values, some of the kind of values on there, and said, can you name them? And maybe it was a little bit unfair, the test, but just off the top of their head, I think they got 1 out of 6. And it was round their neck, and it was round their neck every day, because it wasn't. But that wasn't to say that place was a bad place. It was just that there was a misalignment to, because if you said, what is the culture like? They're like, oh, it's fun, it's friendly, we have a good time, we have a good laugh, it's very high, fast paced. But then if the values don't reflect any of that, it's meaningless, really.
That's sparked something in my head that I was talking to somebody about the other day. It's, do the KPIs of your business, the KPIs
that's much more important,
also reflect the values of your business. That's really hard to get right, I think, really hard. But it's also important. You can't expect your frontline advisors to exhibit and live those values, and often in their roles they are expected to embody those values to the people that they're interacting with, to your customers, to your customers. If they're not then measured against them, if you're measuring on let's go for my least favorite, average handle time. If you're measured on that, but one of the values is empathy, customer focus, or all of that, they're incompatible. And you still see that, you still see it, that the KPIs and the company values are not aligned in any way. And I think it's completely unfair to expect frontline advisors to somehow be able to juggle between the two. It's not reasonable expectation, I don't think.
Well, Maxine, this has been fascinating. I think your kind of passion for everything in our industry and doing the right thing, it's just been great to talk to you. And I have a funny feeling we'll be doing another one at least. So, but Maxine Allard, for now, thank you very much.
No, thank you.